Welcome everyone to Straight Talk Live. And my name is Rick Snyder. I'm one of the co-hosts of our fabulous show. It is a nonprofit project that started in the whole COVID era where Off and I, who I'm about to introduce in a second, we're just not really satisfied with the conversations that are happening in the world, in the media cycles, and how we were just feeling on a deep level. There's so many more important things we need to be talking about as a society and coming together with diversity of opinion and views, and just how obvious it is that a lot of the systems and infrastructures are broken and need to be reimagined. And so that was really the impetus of this show, is to try to really kindle those conversations and cook them by the fire so that we can all digest something that's more nutritious and meaningful. And so I want to introduce, without further ado, my co-host, Af Malhotra. Af, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. Excited to be on the show once again. Every Thursday, I so look forward to this, I have to tell you. And this show in particular, I'm not going to steal Lisa's thunder, but, I'm the co-founder of a company called Growth Enabler, a disruptive AI business that's transforming the way sourcing happens in the world today, and even more important now after this COVID pandemic. And of course, it's a pleasure to have co-founded StraightTalk.Live with my friend Rick. And our show and living room conversation, or study conversation, starts today with Lisa Dion. So Rick, over to you to introduce Lisa, and then let's crack on and get into this. I can't wait.
Yeah, this is really exciting for me. And you just reminded me, I forgot to talk about my background briefly, is I wrote a book called Decisive Intuition, and I'm the CEO of Invisible Edge. And this is really where Off and I come together from two totally different vantage points of the digital transformation that he comes from and knows so well, and I come from more the human transformation, and we're both really passionate about social impact. And that's really the impetus of this whole show, are those three pillars. So we're going to be getting very deep into that today with a very special guest. And her name is Lisa Dion. And she is a fantastic therapist, neuroscientist, best-selling author. She literally started her own branch of therapy. And this whole show is about mavericks and disruptors and new ideas. Imagine starting your own kind of therapy, your own paradigm. That takes some chutzpah masala. That takes some courageous spice, also translated as. That's not easy to do. And I personally have known Lisa for over 20 years. We actually trained together in graduate school in psychology and other additional trainings. And I'll just say this one piece before I hand it over to you, Lisa. Lisa was always one of those people that I remember where I put my big toe in the water, like, should I jump in here? This looks a little intense. And she would already be swimming. So yeah, come in here. Water's warm. I'm like, really? So I've just always appreciated that about you, Lisa, your courage to just dive into the unknown, dive into uncertainty. And in today's world around COVID and social unrest, I don't think I can remember a time in my life of any more uncertainty in the space. And so I want to really learn from you today about how you've been diving in, how you teach people to dive in and swim.
Awesome.
So without further ado, Lisa Dion.
Thank you both so much for asking me to be a part of this pretty awesome conversation that you're starting and that you're having. So super inspired to be here. So yes,
excellent.
Let's just go ahead and dive in.
Yeah. So let's start with this. So transformation, so we're really talking about the neuroscience and how that unlocks our transformation. And the more that we understand not just our mind, but also how our body works and the intelligence of our whole system. So let's start with a personal story. I know that you lead and teach transformation all over the place with organizations and leaders and schools and parents and kids, which we'll be touching on all those themes today. So if you're any of those, this show's for you. But what I want to ask you first is, can you tell us a story about a personal transformation that you had to overcome, that you had to see through, just so we can get a sense of how does this really look in real time with some of the work that you do?
Well, I'll share the story that I shared with you, Rick, for your book when we were having conversation for your book, which was really the beginning of new awareness and insight for me that led me to really appreciate my body in a new way and to then want to understand it, because I realized that there was something quite magical about the feedback I was getting And it was actually that then propelled me on my journey to creating synergetic play therapy, and has really been my compass ever since. And it started with me as a pregnant mom. So I was 29 weeks pregnant, and my daughter and I, and my husband at the time, my unborn daughter, we were in a car accident. We were in a hit and run car accident. And I went into labor at 29 weeks. I did not deliver her then, but I was in labor for 3 days. And while I was in this experience in the hospital, I found myself over the couple of days, I'm going to use the word subordinating to all the outside authorities, subordinating to the doctors and the nurses when everyone was telling me that my body needed. Yet inside there was information and there was this feeling that, no, I need to move. I need to stretch. I need to get in touch with myself. And to make the story, shorter here, I lost myself. And I think that is a key piece when we start talking about what we're going to talk about in this call. We lose ourselves, and we can't be a leader. We can't be the maverick. We can't engage ourselves in transformation when we lose ourselves. And I hit a point in that journey where I got really angry, actually. And I actually decided to not listen to the doctors and the nurses. And I got out of bed, and I began to get in touch with my body. And when I did, this magical thing happened where I actually began to feel my relationship with my daughter in a new way. And I actually felt internally, it was like our nervous system started to sync up once I started to listen to my own intuition. Now, when this happened, I was at the point where they were going to give me one more dose of medication to try to stop the contractions, or I was going to deliver. And what I found was that as I attuned to myself and Avery, my body started to follow suit. And it culminated in my contractions picking up on a particular morning, and me closing my eyes and getting back in touch with myself, back in touch with the information. There really was a rhythm that was happening for me inside. My nervous system, Avery's nervous system, I could feel it. We synced up, and my contraction stopped. And I went home, and I went, what was that? What just happened? And that sent me on a journey. That's what led me into starting to study biology and nervous system states and neuroscience. And also when my baby was born, she was highly what we'll call dysregulated. So she was born in a fight or flight response. And so there was this part of me that really intuitively knew that I need to do something to help her transform her own nervous system and her own activation inside her body, so that she can begin to rest and connect to herself in a new way. And that was the beginning of the whole journey for me, of the creation of synergetic play therapy, how I now train parents, how I work with organizations and entrepreneurs, because I love to teach people about the feedback of the body so that we can sync up to ourselves faster and come home to ourselves faster, listen to our intuition more quickly, get on purpose, go for it. Jump in the deep end faster, Rick.
As she's been telling me the last 20 years. That's beautiful. So really what I'm hearing in that summary here is the key is really when you can really sink into your own nervous system and learn how to regulate yourself. And for those, can you just define that for people who might not know that expression? What do you mean by regulating yourself?
Yeah. So how about we just jump into nervous system? How about we just go there and we just start talking about the building blocks?
Fantastic. Let's do it.
Great. So we have an autonomic nervous system, and our autonomic nervous system has two branches. We have the sympathetic branch, which is designed to rev us up, to take a challenge on. And then we also have our parasympathetic branch, which is designed to slow us down. And one of the misunderstood parts about this parasympathetic branch is there's actually two activations. When we have a perception of a threat or a challenge that's too much, we can slow down to withdraw to go into like a protective, immobilized, I need to protect myself kind of a response. But there's another aspect of the parasympathetic branch, and this is really the key. It's called the ventral vagus response. And this is the part of our nervous system that when we get access to it, it gives us access to the higher centers of our brain. So when we are in a reactionary place, when we are in a fight or flight response, which is the sympathetic state, or we're in it's actually called the dorsal parasympathetic response, which is where we're shutting down, we're withdrawing, looks depressed, start to get tired, start to numb out. Those are both reactions out of a perception of there's a challenge, I don't feel safe, I feel scared. They're protective responses. They're not higher level brain responses. We're not thinking rationally. We're not thinking clearly. We're responding. We're reacting. Actually, I wouldn't even say the word responding. We're reacting in those moments. And this is, when tie this into COVID, this is where a lot of us are these days, is that we're perceiving challenges, or parents, you've got your kids at home, you're perceiving challenges, and the body's responding as it's designed to respond. What we have to learn how to do is, in the midst of all that, how do we regulate? And what regulating means is ultimately, how do we access this other part of our nervous system? How do we access this ventral response that we have, which governs our ability to take a deep breath? It governs and actually has a very intimate relationship with our immune system. One of the fastest and best ways that you can strengthen your immune system is by accessing this particular part of our physiology. In fact, when we live in a heightened reactionary state, we actually suppress our immune system, and we actually make ourselves more susceptible to getting sick. So this is really important for what we're talking about right now in the world at large. So when I say regulate, here's something that I think that might be really interesting for our listeners, is that people often confuse regulating with the word calm. And regulation does not mean calm. Regulation means connected. It means in the midst of my activation, I can connect to myself in the midst of it. So practically speaking, I start to notice I feel anxious or overwhelmed, and I notice it and I take a deep breath. I'm regulating, but I'm not calm. I'm still anxious. I'm still overwhelmed, but I'm connected to myself, which means I'm not losing myself. And that's that key part. So what do I need to do to stay connected to myself in the midst of the activation, instead of pretending to be calm, trying to act like I'm calm, which actually it's not true, and actually dysregulates us even more, and actually dysregulates the people around us even more, because we're incongruent. So I'm going to take a deep breath as I just said that.
Fantastic.
So regulation means connected.
Can I ask you a question? Firstly,
Absolutely.
thank you for that excellent explanation. It's got me thinking about something that's quite important here in terms of real life experiences. One question before I forget though. So let's go back to the example of, you touched on a very, very salient point. So let's imagine a real life state where an individual is anxious, panicking, not in panic state, but worried, concerned because of a situation. Situation could be a COVID related situation. It could be a home situation. It could be a catastrophic situation that's out of their control, whatever. Someone could be really unwell in the house, real issues. It could be to do with money, not being able to go back into work and not knowing how you're going to pay for the bills at home and so on. So, and often people say, calm down, take it easy, take a deep breath, calm down. I get the deep breath. I get, because breathing is so good for you. And of course, we don't breathe a lot. When we're anxious, we stop breathing, in fact. And many of us, this point around, you used the word not regulated, or there was a better way you articulated it. So there are people who have this demeanor or this front fascia of trying to pretend that they're calm.
Yes.
Because they think, if I pretend I'm calm, then it's okay because people think I'm really cool. I'm a great leader because it doesn't it doesn't bother me. That sort of attitude. But what you're basically saying is that is not healthy. So can you just dig into that a little bit? Maybe a few more examples of when that happens next in our lives, what should we be saying to ourselves?
Sure. I'll explain it even a little bit deeper. Incongruence in the environment, which is what you just described. Something doesn't match up. We're acting calm, but we're not actually feeling calm. Registers, because we walk through the world really looking at and picking up on all the nonverbal cues in our environment. And when someone isn't fully congruent, we know it. You know it. There's a strange feeling when you're talking to them and you're like, really? I don't really know about that. It's actually one of the things that the brain looks for to determine if there's a threat in the environment. So actually, when we are not congruent emotionally, it can actually be registered in other people's brains as we are actually a threat. And that's really interesting. Parents, I hope you just heard what I said. So if I am a leader, so in my own business, for example, I'll give two examples. COVID hit. If I were to walk in and attempt to be all, calm and this and that and whatever and pretend like I've got it all together, but inside what's actually happening is I'm scared, I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed, what's going to happen to the business. Okay, there's a lot of new pressures here to adapt and adjust and change, and I'm not naming it. My staff actually can't fully settle. That's very different than me showing up as a leader and saying, okay, everyone, I'm nervous and we're going to put a plan together. Okay, everyone, yes, this is stressful. I'm feeling it too. Totally. Last night was a hard night's sleep and let's get to work. There's a difference because what it does is it gives permission for my staff and it gives permission for the people that are around me to also become real about what they're experiencing, which actually creates safety and trust and unity in the group. Now that's different. So notice, I said, I named my experience, but a great word to use instead of calm is poised. That could be a replacement word. I can be poised in my anxiety. I can be poised in my overwhelm. I can be poised in my anger. I don't have to pretend like I'm not having those feelings. That's different than me showing up in the office going, oh my gosh, everybody, everybody's stressed out. Blah, blah, blah. That's different. I really encourage people to really look at your own congruency and your own incongruency in your relationships, where you are a leader, parents, because it is an important piece to the larger puzzle of if I'm going to transform something, if I'm going to lead something, authenticity wins. Ultimately, yeah.
Would you say, it's burning, so I've got to ask it. There are three people on this call, and we come from two different parts of the world, at least in terms of geography. You've got yourself and Rick, who come from the United States, and there is a culture. There's a way of speaking. There's a way you communicate. There's a lot more usage of hands. There's a lot of passion, mostly when communication is going on in that part of the world. A lot of good energy. I'm sitting in the United Kingdom, which has all of those things, but of course we have a different way of communicating, more timid, calm, if you want to call, if it's the word calm, I don't poised. And emotions aren't, it's ingrained in us, even from school, not to sort of show those emotions. Yep. And it's almost become part of a subculture, or even in the politics that exists here. Too much emotion is seen as a negative thing. And that's been really confusing for me, because I'm passionate about where I live and I've grown up here, and I'm equally passionate about the way people communicate in other parts of the world, including the United States. And there's this misinterpretation, I think. I mean, this is a very important point, because when you don't, authenticity and what it really means is speaking to yourself internally. And if I feel like speaking with the volume up a little bit, I'm not aggressive, I'm not assertive, but I want to get my point across. I feel really passionately about this point, and I express myself with total authenticity, right? And sometimes people have that passion, but they hold themselves back, and they struggle to come out of that shell, even in high stress situations. It's like the habit that gets created. What would you say? And you've traveled the world, you've met all sorts of people, and parents are a good example, as are executives or leaders. Practice at home the culture that you've picked up in your country, in your nation, whatever it may be, passionate or timid or calm or whatever it may be. It's hard to break out of that, and sometimes you forget what authentic means.
Mm-hmm. I love the point. Yeah, I love the point that you're making. So I travel the world, and I teach all over the world to many different cultures. And there is a difference culturally in how emotions are expressed. And I think what I want people to hear more is that even though emotions are expressed differently in every culture, everyone still feels. Everybody still has activation in their nervous system. Mm-hmm. And so it's about you discovering your own authenticity with that. So even in the United States, for example, I mean, yes, I live in the United States, but I'm Italian. So my expression is bigger than some people that I know in the United States. And I've been told, Lisa, you're very expressive. Yes, I am. I also, I've got a fiery side to me. But that's who I am. And for me to embrace that as my own authentic way of expressing, that may not be how somebody else embraces the expression and their authenticity. And so I actually think that it's important wherever someone lives, whatever culture they're in, that the question is, am I congruent with myself? How do I feel about how I express or don't? Does it feel congruent? Am I hiding? Am I shutting down? Am I shaming myself? Am I subordinating? Or is this genuinely me? And everyone has to go on a journey to discover what that looks like for themselves.
I want to jump on this really quick too, because I think what you're saying is so important, that there is a cultural programming that we all have by birth, based on the cultures that we've been grown up with before we had a chance to really digest anything about that. It's so ingrained in who we are. And what if it's our responsibility now to look at what of that actually fits for me, of that cultural programming, what doesn't? Mm-hmm. And do I have the courage to follow my own expression and essence and discover, even be curious about what that is? Mm-hmm. And how do I want to express? Does that fit for me, that everyone has a stiff upper lip when they're going through a tough time? Does that fit for me in my way of leading? So I just want to mention that point. I think it's really important to bring that curiosity for each of us. Lastly, what you're having me think about, Lisa, is also the responsibility of leaders to set a culture where people can discover their expression and can discover their essence and how to best communicate effectively. I'm thinking about a big organization that I'm coaching right now, where there's several different subgroups and ethnicities that are part of the culture, and other countries and nations that are part of this huge conglomerate. And what they've realized is everyone has some different values of what productivity means, what effectiveness means, what kind of communication style is actually appropriate and effective, or sometimes abusive in the leadership expression. And so what they're realizing is it's the leader's job and the leadership team's job to keep everyone connected to, well, what's our culture? What are our values? How do we reestablish that, no matter where you're coming from or which nation you're calling in from every day from your job? How do we recontext our culture that's going to be in most alignment for who we are and what we're trying to do?
Absolutely. I want to throw in another neuroscience piece just to go here. So a thing that we can understand as leaders, and when I say leader, I'm talking about a parent, because a parent's a leader. I'm talking about just your own role, maybe in your family system. I'm talking about if you run an organization, but wherever you find yourself in a position where you have the ability to lead. So we'll open it that way. When our nervous systems say hello to each other, because that's what's actually happening. So my nervous system activation that I just described, the fight or flight response, or the shutdown, or even, as I access my own regulatory system, there's a quality, there's an energetic quality to that. And there's actually a vibration to that. And so what happens is, Rick, when you and I, say hello as an example, my nervous system is saying hello to your nervous system. And your nervous system actually says hello back to my nervous system. In fact, the three of our nervous systems right now, we're saying hello. We're trying to find our almost like collective resonance right now, even as we're having as a discussion. Right now, culturally and in the world, there's a collective nervous system hello that's happening. The resonance of it is one of anxiety. It's one of fear, and we feel it, and there's like a ripple effect, but it's our nervous system saying hello to each other. So where I'm going with this is that part of our job as a leader is to recognize our responsibility with that. If I'm walking into a room, or if I'm communicating with someone and I understand that people are going to be saying hello to my nervous system, that's a different kind of responsibility, because I have the potential of setting the rhythm for how things are going to go. I call this becoming the external regulator. So if, for example, I walk into a group or a room of highly anxious people, and I walk in and I don't connect to myself in that, and my nervous system gets caught in the anxiety, there's no leader. There's no nervous system leader, if that makes sense. But if I walk in and I'm going to feel the anxiety, whether I like it or not, but I recognize it, and then I come back to myself and I hold on to myself in it, all of a sudden, everybody else in the room has something that they also get to grab hold of. They actually get to borrow now my nervous system. They get to borrow the regulatory capacity that I have. They can borrow the poised part of me. They can borrow my breath. They can borrow my my movement if I'm moving. They can borrow my whatever it is that they need to borrow. But unless I am able to connect to myself, there's nothing for someone else to borrow. So when I walk into my team meetings right now, when there's a lot of stress, this is one of the things I have in the back of my mind. As the leader of my company, I am the primary external regulator. And how I show up actually sets the stage for permission for other people to either connect to themselves or not. Same thing in my home with my daughter. If my daughter is having a hard time, can I remember that she's also borrowing my nervous system? And by the way, I'll just share a story just to humanize this, because as I'm talking about this, I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation for us, because we're still human, which means sometimes we are not going to be the external regulator because we're just caught in our own stuff. So just to normalize this, 2 weeks ago, I was having a morning where I was experiencing a lot of overwhelm. And my pattern when I get overwhelmed is I start moving more quickly. My voice gets a little bit pushier. It's a little edgier. It's a little, this kind of a thing. And I sat down to have breakfast. My daughter, who's 14, she sat down and she looked at me and she said, "Mom, I'm feeling your overwhelm." And I looked at her and she said, "Breathe." This is my 14-year-old. But I've also communicated with her and taught her this. So she understands this, the relationship that we have with our own nervous systems. So she became my external regulator in that moment. But her nervous system, she was starting to spin out because my nervous system was going, blah, 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 right? And she was picking up on it. And for her to be able to name it. So I'm just putting it out there that we're human. And even in the best of our intention, we're going to have other people, and sometimes it's our kids, that are going to become our external regulators.
I love this point that you're busting the myth that there's a fantasy that we're always in our center and a leader has to fake it till they make it. I love that you're putting holes through all these, bullshit images and projections we have, because it's so important that we have to be, you're actually encouraging us to be more human. Mm-hmm. Get even more related to your humanity, to your fears, your anxieties, feel them, and learn how to not get overwhelmed by them. And what do you need to do to regulate that for yourself? And we'll get more into that in a moment. But then also to be that present antenna of that. You're an antenna of that emotional intelligence, embodied intelligence, intuition for those around you as well, and in each other. And I just keep seeing this image of all these human antennas pairing and syncing up or dysregulating with static and fear. And the media is not helping. Let's just call that out right now. The media doesn't help our antennas regulate by any sense. So we have to be double down strong on how do we come back to center, especially in these times of chaos.
Well, and in the United States in particular, what I see, because I can only speak for the United States, is I see people looking around for an external regulator. They're looking around going, where's the nervous system, in the sense that I can plug into to help me find my center. I don't know where's the external regulator. And when what's being offered is something that's also, I love the static, is staticky, we don't know where to go. We don't know where to go within ourselves. So yes. So can we become that in our communities? And can we become that in our families, in our relationships? Can we make that decision?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, what do you think about body language? And, for those of us who believe in, you have these motivators on the planet today, like whether it's the Tony Robbins School of Motivation and Mindset and Walking on Coal and many others that are out there. And they're all doing their part, and they're doing good work for the communities that support them. And that's great. Anything that helps you get out of a rut or makes you feel more regulated, right? What are your thoughts on, I just want to make sure that the audience understands the difference. So what are your thoughts on physical movement, body related shifts and high fives and come on, and moving your arms around and getting the energy going? Is that the same thing as being regulated, and are they interconnected, or are we talking about two different things? Because what I'm thinking about here is someone's listening to this thinking, right, what I'm going to do is I need to be more energetic, guys. I'm going to get up, start running around, running the park, come back, high five. I'm ready now. I'm regulated. Please help us understand. Is there a difference, or is it the same thing?
So it completely depends, but the way I heard you just describe it, that sounds more manic than regulated.
The voice of sanity. I like this.
If we keep in mind the definition of regulated simply means connected. So can I be excited and regulated? Yes. Can I be excited and dysregulated? Yes. Can I have low energy and be regulated? Yes. Can I have low energy and be dysregulated? Yes. So it goes back to the experience of connection. So do you want me to, this is a great time just to jump in and talk a little bit about the body and what we can do to actually regulate.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. I think people out here are chomping at the bit of, how could I regulate myself? How do I get more connected?
Like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So the greatest tool that we have, so we'll start here and then I'll fill the toolbox with all kinds of interesting things. The greatest tool we have is our breath. Our breath truly is the fastest way home. When we get dysregulated, our breathing patterns naturally change. So when we go into a sympathetic fight or flight response, we develop what's called shallow breathing. And shallow breathing is where we have a long inhalation and we don't let it all go. So it's almost like panic breathing. It's a stress breathing response. And we don't have a full extended exhalation. So that's how it goes in sympathetic. When we flip to the other side and we go into the dorsal collapse in a dysregulated way, it's actually the opposite. You're not actually bringing enough air in. You're actually letting too much air out. So one of the ways that we can grab hold of ourselves in any moment is to pause and simply become aware of our breathing pattern, and then to provide the breathing pattern what it needs. So for example, if I notice, maybe everyone can even try it. If I notice that I am feeling stressed, overwhelmed, panicky, anxious, irritated, mad, frustrated, and I'm going sympathetic, how can I do things to elongate my exhalation? Maybe it's taking a deep breath and just, maybe it's sighing. Maybe it's, just actively just let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go, let it go. So that's one way, just to become aware of the breathing pattern itself. And then the flip side, if I'm feeling really down, really depressed, how can I actually bring more air in so that I can come back to center? So do I need to bring more air in? Do I need to let more air out? And that's something, if you're standing in the middle of a meeting and you start to feel the nervous system's talking, that's one that you can do right there really quickly, or you're at home and the kids are acting out. Really a great way to grab hold of yourself. So breathing. The next one is movement. So, and the movement can look like all kinds of different things. It can look like, just becoming aware of your feet and just moving your feet back and forth. It can be just shifting positions in your chair. It can be stretching. It can be actually going on a walk. It can be a little bit closer to home, where we do what I call bringing in proprioceptive input into the body. So proprioceptive input. So right now I'm squeezing my arms, squeezing my joints, I'm squeezing my head, I'm squeezing my legs. And proprioceptive input is information to the joints and the bones in the body. And when we do this, we're literally telling ourselves, I am here. I am here. Because when we get dysregulated and we start to lose ourselves, we lose our sense of I'm here. So grabbing hold of yourself to bring you back into your body can be super, super helpful. I do a lot of, as many of us do now, a lot of my work is on the computer. I have a weighted blanket that I keep on my legs so that my body stays grounded in proprioceptive input, so that I stay connected to myself as I'm feeling whatever I'm feeling in the call. So things like this. Things like splashing cold water on the face, running your hands under cold water in the faucet. Cold water actually activates the ventral response that we're talking about. All these examples I just gave you activate the ventral response. Things like at the end of your shower, the very last minute of your shower, take the water and turn it on cool, the last minute of your shower. And it seems like, oh, these interesting little things, but they're all designed to actually help you regulate your nervous system, to get back to you. Rubbing the sides of your neck. Out of curiosity, how many of you, I mean, like both of you, like you've been overwhelmed and you've gone like, oh, and like have ever like just grabbed your neck? You're actually grabbing, and when you grab the sides of your neck, this actually activates your vagus nerve, because your vagus nerve actually has, we'll call it tentacles that go up this way. Some people, when they're overwhelmed, they go, oh, and they do this to their head. They put their hand on their head. That activates your ventral response. So it's these little things that sometimes we don't think about. Sipping cold water when we're, when we're getting overwhelmed, just sipping cold water. These little things help us come home.
Wow, fabulous. By the way, when you were describing what you were describing there, I don't know about Rick, I was definitely trying to breathe more. You probably know this, right? Because you're talking about something that's so natural. Now you were, and I'm sure the audience was too, when you were saying breathe in, breathe out, all the way in, all the way out. As you were speaking, I was thinking about my breathing. Mm-hmm. And that brings me to another interesting point, which is there's a self-fulfilling prophecy, a good one here, in the sense that you're the company you keep. Mm-hmm. If you're hanging around with people, friends, family, children, as you put it, in your case, who remind you to breathe, something as simple as, hey, you know, when I'm caught up, just remind me to breathe again. Mm-hmm. It sounds so simple and obvious, right? Almost a little bit patronizing for some people. But of course, it's so important for us, especially with the collective, you know, mindset that maybe a little bit more anxiety driven today because of the situation we're in. We have to keep reminding each other, hey, Lisa, take a deep breath in and just breathe. And I don't know, hold your head, you know, press your neck, or why don't you give me a massage? I'll be sure to get my wife to watch this if she's not watching it live. By the way, hugging must be good too, no? Like
hugging activates the proprioceptive pressure. I was actually going to say, you know, if you're feeling overwhelmed, have your partner lie on top of you and like put heavy pressure on top of you, or your kids, parents. If your child is really struggling and they're okay with touch, lie on top of them. Go hold them, squeeze them, you know, rub their arms, rub their legs, physically ground them back into their body. If they're open to that. Some kids are like, don't do that. The fastest way and the greatest thing we can do is to become that external regulator. And yes, sometimes it's reminding people, hey, maybe take a deep breath, like my daughter did with me. And sometimes it's us just doing it, recognizing that their nervous system is going to feel it when we do it. And the more I can sit there and take care of myself, and they're watching me take care of myself, they're also learning through modeling. Mm-hmm. So we don't always have to even talk about it. Can we also just do it? Just do it.
For me, Lisa, this conversation is really hitting the whole point of embodied leadership. Mm-hmm. And we talk so much about embodied leadership, but from my experience, and I think Af, you'd probably agree too, the corporate world is still so far behind of what it actually means to be an embodied leader and why that's even important. And not just being stuck in our heads in our analysis, but not really being the adult in the room,
right?
When we need to lead, when we need to feel what we need to feel, whether it's our own nervousness in the morning, but we have to find the and. Like, I'm nervous and we need to make a plan.
Yes.
You know, I'm freaking out and let's put our best thoughts together right now in this whiteboard session because we need to figure this out.
Yes.
And I know we can.
Yesterday, I'll share this. Yesterday, I had a really important meeting with my staff and many students regarding what's happening right now in our country with what's happening with Black people and with white privilege. And it was an incredibly tender, emotional, hard conversation because my company, we have white privilege in my company, and I'm a white woman, and I'm a white woman leader. And there was one point as I'm poised while I'm crying as the leader, I let myself cry, but I cried in a poised way. And there was a point when it started to feel too much, and I looked at the group and I said, "Can somebody regulate me?" And as the leader, I asked somebody to become the leader in a moment where I could come back to myself so that then I could lead again. Because sometimes as leaders, we also think, well, we have to have it all together and we always have to be the one. And actually, in my opinion, true leadership is the person that's willing to share the leadership in moments when they know they can't lead. And I hit a moment when I couldn't lead because the conversation was so emotional for me. And I asked someone, please regulate me. She did. She stepped in because she was more poised than I was in that moment, took it over for a little bit until I could step back in and continue the conversation. That's embodied leadership in my opinion. and not being afraid to show up with tears, and not to be afraid to show up dysregulated and emotional. Yeah.
Brilliant. We can speak for hours, I think, because you're a fantastic communicator, and you have such an amazing experience that I know many of our audience members, in fact, both Rick and I, need to sit down and we need to have a coffee conversation or a glass of wine or whatever it may be. I always bring alcohol up for some reason. I'm not alcoholic at all.
That's how you regulate.
That's the external regulator.
So there are a few questions. We're going to throw them at you because it's important we get them answered, and we can probably have a go at this together. The first question in reverse order is one from Facebook from Minal, who actually happens to be my wife, so she is listening.
Hi, Minal.
Yeah, hey. So two questions or two parts. The first one is what can teaching professionals do to aid children with what you're sharing? That's the first part of the question. And a connected part is, what are the non-touch methods with young children?
I love this. Great. So for teaching professionals, and I'll answer this whether you're having to do this through the computer, because that's many people's reality. And then I also know that there are some teachers that are back in the classrooms with children. So to recognize that as the teacher, you're the leader and you are the external regulator. And if you have 20 children, 10 children, however many, you're going to feel the dysregulation in their nervous system. Their nervous systems are going to say hello to your nervous system. The first thing is we have to be willing to feel it. I have to be willing to acknowledge it. I have to be willing to because I'm not going to regulate myself if I'm dismissing that I'm even having an experience. So I have to that's step one. I have to just be willing to be in it with them. The next piece is also to name it. Name it. Wow, everyone, this is hard. Or, gosh, there's a lot of energy right now. Or, is everyone falling asleep? Or whatever it may be. Or, gosh, everyone, I'm feeling nervous today. I wonder if everyone else is feeling nervous today. Be willing to have a conversation and name it. And then the next piece is to model or to bring in some type of breathing. So with children need to regulate often. So when I go into schools, what I'm looking at is how can we change the curriculum or the schedule in the school to that which incorporates proactive regulation throughout the day. So what that literally could look like is before I even start teaching something, I'm like, everybody up. I want everyone stretching with me. As you're stretching, I want you to breathe. I want you to feel, okay, all right. And maybe 15 minutes later, okay, everyone, check in with your bodies. What do they need? Does it need to wiggle? Does it need to move? Does it need to? And what you're doing is you're helping children attune over and over and over to their body's needs while they're learning, but you're also proactively forcing them to do something, which is different than sit at the computer, stare at a screen, and let's get this activity done for the next hour, which none of us were built to do. With some children, I will say, please do not sit down. I actually want you to put your computer down, and if you need to pace in the back of the room while I'm talking, I don't have an expectation of the child to sit still while they learn. Because I recognize that the body for many children needs to move while they learn. Sit on a yoga ball. I don't care. Do jumping jacks while I'm talking, whatever it may be. So the non-touch things can be very similar to what I just said. One of the things that my daughter and I do, we have dance parties. We have I'll notice that Avery's struggling, or it's just been a hard day, and next thing you know, I am turning music on in the kitchen, and it is dance party time in the kitchen. Or it's, let's go on a walk. Or it is, hey, like maybe we both just need to go take a shower, just go chill out, take a shower. So we don't always have to touch. It can be, you can sing a song together. You can play a game together. You can, anything that you can think of to help them connect to themselves. If we can just keep that as the thought. What do I need to do in this moment to help the kids connect? What do I need to do in this moment to help them connect?
There's a great question that just came in that I think is interesting on the back of that. Cameron asks, what are good ways to propose regulation or connection, as we're talking about, for people who are usually shut off from the idea of regulation, whether you have a boss or other family members or friends that are just not open to that? How do you do that in those kinds of contexts? What do you recommend?
And you don't expect them to do it.
Mm.
You do it and you model it. And then they look at you going, I wonder why you're doing better than the rest of us.
Will you lead this meeting next?
You seem to have figured something out that I have not figured out yet.
Yeah. So lead. Wherever you are on the org chart, you have an opportunity to lead.
Lead.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that.
You might be regulating the boss.
Very cool. Another one that's really great is, do you have any advice or tips that you would give leaders to regulate at times when they lack clarity and certainty about an important decision to make?
So is this on their own, or is this like in a team meeting?
It's not specified. Let's take both really quick if we can.
Okay. So on my own, I'm dysregulated, let's say, because I don't know, I feel confused, I feel afraid, whatever that may be. So one of the things I haven't said explicitly, but this can help, part of, if you think about all the ways that I have just asked you to regulate, they involve both sides of your body. So whether it's you're standing in the shower and the water's hitting both sides of your body, whether it's squeezing your arms and you're squeezing both sides of your arm, whether it's both sides of your neck, whether it's this, your hand on your head, you're getting both sides of your body. When we make contact with both sides of our body, we're basically getting both hemispheres to talk. When we feel stuck inside, the hemispheres have stopped communicating. So one of the things that we can do is to take a walk, right? We're left, right. You're doing things that have bilateral movement, because as you think about the question and you're getting your body aligned again while it's like jumper cables on a car when the car is all of a sudden stuck. So you can actually create that movement within yourself. Another one that not necessarily about the body, but also to take the time to look at the fears that are potentially keeping you stuck, or that are so if I go this direction, what are the fears? If I go this direction, what are the fears? And to really look at, well, what's the worst case scenario? And what would I need to do to handle worst case scenario? And what's the worst case scenario over here? And what would I need to do to handle this worst case scenario? And can I stay connected to myself in these worst case scenarios so that I can hold my center, knowing that I might make a decision here that feels really, really scary. But breathe, find your center, stay grounded in the midst of the uncertainty and the anxiety.
It goes back to, I just want to add a point. You're talking about what we were taught in the corporate for years, the concept of scenario planning. And the power, and this is really interesting. I've come across people who sort of say, oh, forget about the future, forget about the scenarios, we'll just go with the flow, live in the now, live in the present. And I get that, and I think that's fantastic, but I'm also a believer in what you've just said, which is about building response systems. We recently, Rick and I were chatting with a suite of Navy SEALs who we're looking to bring on the show. And one thing, a particular individual who I will remain nameless for the purpose of this show, sort of said, look, you at the end of the day in the military, you're taught to look at scenarios and analyze situations. You have to almost simulate yourself in those situations. Imagine you're in that extreme situation. And by practicing to be in the situation on and on, your response system builds up, your emotions build up, your resilience builds up, your regulation, you self-regulate by imagining you're in that system. It's not comfortable, of course, at that point, but when the real thing, God forbid, if it ever happens, your response system is ready. It's a little bit more trained than the next person.
And that is key, because when we hit a stress response, the part of our brain, our prefrontal cortex, and the lower centers of our brain that respond when we feel afraid don't communicate. So if I haven't taken the time to pre-plan, I lose my ability to grab hold of what to do. My mind literally, I freeze. I don't know what to do. But if I've spent time thinking out what worst case scenario would be, and what do I need to do to stay connected to myself when the stress hits, yes, I'm going to feel the stress, but it's much easier to grab hold of the solution because I've already thought it through.
Spot on. And this goes to the point, for CEOs listening into this call now or on replays, and we have a whole bunch of C-suite executives, Lisa, coming onto the show as well from big companies. This concept of discontinuities, right? Disruptions, irregularities that happen in a system where you're out of the linear mode into something that's unpredictable, a la pandemic, right? And it can happen again, and there could be something worse that happens, God forbid, later. The big thing right now is for CEOs who are used to incrementality or keeping the lights on mentality. Hey, it's all cool. It ain't broke. Let's not try and fix anything. It's good. We're good. And, they would now be called complacent CEOs. They're now looking at discontinuities in a big way to say, we have to get ready for the extreme situations. And I think that's what COVID has done. Your examples today are extremely important because none of this success, none of this good work, even building StraightTalk.Live has come out of some level of regulation that we've created ourselves, both Rick and I. And we want to try and transmit that. I mean, what you're doing today and what we're doing today is a transmission. It's a frequency that's going out to the listeners now or in the replays. Exactly. So, I mean, phenomenal. Rick, do you want to ask one more question? And we can go on for ages. But one more question. I think there are quite a few in particular that gets your attention there.
Yeah, let's one last rapid fire here. Rahul Patel asks, how do we unlock that channel of communication to be able to pick up on all these nonverbal triggers? How do we do that?
So I'm assuming, if I'm hearing this correctly, that the question is about how do we unlock the channels within ourselves. I think that's how I'm. So I think this is actually a really important question, particularly if we have been trained to not pay attention to what's going on in our bodies, or if we have disconnected from our body for whatever reason. Maybe there was a trauma, maybe we had an injury, maybe we were sick, maybe we have some sensory sensitivities, whatever it can be, because we can have experiences that occur in the body or messages about when we're in the body and we're feeling things that say, don't go there. It's too scary. It's too big. Where we learn to not live in our bodies. We learn to disconnect. And so what I will say is that it is a beautiful beginning of a journey back home, but it is a gentle unraveling. If we have been taught that it's not safe to be in the body for whatever reason, to expect ourselves to all of a sudden go, oh, and now I'm aware of my body, and now I'm listening to my body. That's not how it works. There's a reason why we disconnected in the first place. Start with the breath. Start with questions like, do I notice anything in my body? What do I notice? Is there any discomfort? Where is that discomfort? Begin to just heighten your awareness just little by little into the body even more. If you're finding yourself angry, how do I know that I'm angry? How do I know? I can hear that I'm angry, but how do I know I'm angry? What's actually happening in my body? Oh my gosh, I can't feel anything, but I'm noticing that my hands are in a fist. Beautiful place to start. I'm crying. Well, how did I get here? How do I even know that I'm sad? What does that feel like? And it's just gentle inquiries to help us begin to just wake up our system a little bit. And every time we do, we're saying, it's okay to come home. It's okay to come home. It's okay to come home. It's okay to come home.
One of my favorite bits, lastly, around that piece right there is that first question, what is it that I'm feeling? How do I first acknowledge whatever it is my experience is? And then number two, what's this in relationship to? What's my sadness in relationship with right now? Or if I'm extra tense, what is that actually in relationship with exactly? And that one question really helps me fine tune that connection. Wherever the disconnect has been, it starts to lock back in and sync up. Yeah. And then I can start making sense of my experience in a deeper way.
Beautiful.
Lisa, you got a huge compliment from Rahul after answering that question. He said, Lisa, you're outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It was a really beautiful question.
I'm sure many of our listeners feel the same. I think it's one of the most, exciting, interesting, and profound sessions that we've run. I'm going to do a plug in here. I really would love, I'm sure Rick feels the same, love you to come back. Next session, I'd love to talk to you about trauma. Because after this thing's finished, and it will, there's been a lot of sadness. A lot of people have lost people in their lives because of the pandemic, and where the world is with rioting and looting, and there's going to be some sadness, a lot of sadness actually in 2020. We need to come back to this, and we would love you to come back at some point if you
would love to.
If you have time. And
yes,
I would love to. That's an important conversation.
Lisa, how can people find out about you? Where should they go?
So for individuals that are curious about my work with children, so if you're a parent or a teacher, you can go to synergeticplaytherapy.com. If you're interested in what I do with adults or organizations, you can go to my personal website, which is lisa-dion.com.
Fantastic. I just want to say what an honor it is to have you on this call with us today. For me, it's really everyone out there who really who hears that term embodied leadership. This is what it's about. This conversation is what it means to be an embodied leader, to really lead through your experience and affect change in your environment. Literally, wherever you sit on the org chart, it doesn't matter. Whether you're the C-level executive, you're a mid-manager, you're an entry-level employee, or you're not in an organization, you're with your family on a picnic and stuff goes down. This is what this is about. Or you're in the community right now and you're protesting. And how do you be that leader? How do you be the adult and regulate yourself first and connect, and then those around you? And that has a ripple effect. And that has a calmness or a poise that we don't see in our top leadership right now, which is why I think so many people are freaking out. So really, please watch the replay. Please send this to people who need to hear this message. This is a really critical episode. So, and lastly, next week, we're going to be getting into systems thinking. How do we look on a bigger systemic level of where we lost the plot, how we find our way back home, how we need to re-look and think at the connections we're not making in our complex world today, with Darcy Winslow, who is an exceptional leader and the one who actually started the whole women's footwear and apparel at Nike after meeting a lot of resistance and had to go through a lot of male-dominated barriers to push that forward into what it is today. So stay tuned next week. And again, thank you so much, Lisa Dion.
Rick, there are a couple of people who dropped out. Could you just give them a sense of where they can find the replay? I think a lot of people would want to see the replay on
yeah. Just go to StraightTalk.Live and type in your name, and you'll get the replay for this episode or any future episodes. And then, of course, if you're on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, you'll see the live replay on that as well. So please check it out, StraightTalk.Live. Thank you, Af. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Be well, everyone. Stay regulated. Stay connected.